Today's podcast guest is proficient in the art of big blue marlin fishing. We're going to sit down with Captain Chris Donato and go through different types of lures, what they're used for, how you can make them work the way you want them to, and what to look for in the spread. Stay tuned. It's a chat you're not going to want to miss. What's up, you guys? Welcome to the Katie C. Sawyer podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and today we have big marlin fisherman Chris Donato joining us on the scene. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you are checking in from Kona, is that right?
Yep. We're over
And
here in Kona.
I love that. So I personally have never been to Hawaii. I've never fished the Kona scene, not even close. I just have heard a lot about it. So I'm really excited to have you here. You have an extremely fascinating background that I think might be a conversation for another time. You've done some incredible things. I want you to go over that a little bit with us. But then I really, really want to dive into the world of lure fishing, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kona is known for its lure fishery.
Yeah. I mean, that's what everybody's pretty much doing. Unless they're just fishing for ahis or something with live baits, it's pretty much all lure fishery. The conditions just make it easy for us. We're like in a swimming pool, and the way the fish feed here and everything. I mean, it's kind of like the birthplace of like modern lure fishing for the most part. And yeah, that's it's the spot to do it. That's for sure.
I'm particularly excited because it's not like you've spent your entire life fishing Kona. You've spent, I mean, you're originally from New Jersey and
Yes.
fished the East Coast. Grew up sometime in Florida, correct? Spent some time in Florida
Yeah,
growing up.
South Florida. Yep.
And then
So,
you ran several charter operations in the Southern Pacific in Samoa and French
Samoa and
Polynesia.
then Vanuatu. Yeah.
Vanuatu. Man,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So give us
Yeah.
a little bit of like a rundown. You know, I want to know what your age range was, what you were doing, and we're going to dive in a separate episode of what makes Chris, but give us
Yeah,
just like a
sure.
professional rundown of your experiences.
Yeah. I won't draw it out too much because it's a whole thing we could go down. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much just grew up pretty much fascinated with the South Pacific and fishing and surfing too. Surfing was probably what brought me more so into that area. I went to Costa Rica a bit and did that, but then I did a trip down to French Polynesia. Actually, was the first time, and actually wasn't fishing. I was actually working on a sailboat, so it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I was
No. How old were
on
you?
a sailboat.
How old were you?
I was pretty young. I was like 17 or 16 or something. I was pretty young, and I had an opportunity to do it, and I was like, I want to check this out. This is
No,
cool.
come on. Like, what a way to get exposed to
Yeah.
it. That's amazing.
So like sailing and surfing and checking that part of the world out, and I was like, wow, this is insane. And I always loved fishing, but so I obviously thought like obviously there's a lot of fish here. So it took a little while for me to end up getting back down to that part of the world fishing wise. I went and surfed a lot, but I would just go surf and come back or whatever. And then I was fishing in Florida. And long story short, I ended up being involved in a surfing resort with a buddy of mine in Samoa. And so we started building it up, and we have little skiffs. We go out to all the reefs to surf. And so I was one year like, okay, I'm going to bring down all my Florida stuff because the seasons were a little bit different. And I would go down there when I wasn't fishing in Florida. I would take time and go down or whatever. So I was like, I'm going to bring down a bunch of stuff and just go fish with our little like panga style boats and check it
What's the
out.
time of the year, and how old are you at this point in time?
At that point, I was probably 19. Yeah, somewhere around that. I think I was pretty young. Because I was in college. Yeah, I was about 19, I think. Maybe just turning that. But I don't. To be honest, Samoa's a little bit like here in terms of like seasons. I mean, you could fish there year round. It just gets really rough in our summer, which is their winter. And then I get it just kind of gets kind of choppy and rough and windy and trade winds blow. And, I caught my grander there in November. So I kind of say that that was the season, but you can fish there year round, really. Um,
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. That
NBD.
was a big monkey to get off my back for sure. But, anyways, yeah, so I just went down there and just like brought some stuff and just, I got my ass handed to me. I mean, I thought I knew what I was, I thought I knew billfish and stuff. And I had like, I think my biggest was like a 50, and I'm on a panga by myself cruising around doing
Oh my
what I probably
gosh.
shouldn't be doing. And,
After your experience, what were you doing in South Florida? Sail fishing and sword fishing?
sail fishing and sword fishing. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe an occasional
Humbling.
white marlin or something.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was yeah. And I had done some I'd done offshore stuff, but like I just wasn't to that extent. And so yeah, so at that point it was like, okay, this is the place. And it took some time, and just things just evolved. And next thing you know, I'm down there. I'm running a 43-foot cabo there, and then ran a boat in Vanuatu, and then we cruised around the islands, and it just turned into pretty much what I did up until 2016. Was just down in there in the South Pacific for the most part. I'd come back forth, but yeah, that was it. So
So
just loved it
how
down
old
there.
were you in 2016? Like what's the time frame there? Like how many years were you doing that?
Um, Gosh, I think maybe 15 years I was in
That's
Samoa.
amazing. Mm,
Yeah, I'm not the best with
you're good.
but yeah, so around that, I'm 41 now, and I moved down here in 2016.
So
So
throughout your like
uh,
late teens, your
let me
20s,
get
and
my
into your
calculator.
30s.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm a knucklehead when it comes to that type, like time frames and stuff. That's I'm really not the best with it, but but I was down there for a while, and then I had the 37 Merit, and I had a someone that came in and was Joe, who actually was my crew for a long time. He works on the Seaweeds now, and
Cool.
he was in like the film industry for a while, like working as like I forget what the word like working with all these like movie stars and stuff, like helping them with things they needed or whatever, kind of like
Hmm.
a assistant
Agent?
kind of deal.
Yeah.
And he did really well. And then I think he just really wanted to get into his passion of fishing. So he had contacted me, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to get over to Kona. And we ended up being partners in the beginning. And he invested money so I could ship that boat to Hawaii. And then he worked for me for years. And um, yeah, it was pretty cool. So that's
That
how
is
I ended up
super cool. So you
down there.
shipped the
And
boat
we
from
shipped that. We had a
Vanuatu?
37 Merit. No, the Merit. Well, so I was in Samoa for a while. Then I went to Vanuatu, and I was there for a while. And then there was a tsunami that came through and wiped out like our whole resort, everything in Samoa.
Was
So
that in
I had to.
2014?
No, it was before then. It was
Ah,
it just hit like Tonga and Samoa. It wasn't the one that hit like
how
Indonesia. A lot of
awful.
people think of it. But yeah, it was terrible. And luckily nobody died on our
Oh,
property,
good.
but like
Oh.
and everyone in the resort got evacuated. We were really lucky there. Um but yeah, it was totally lost everything.
Mm.
So we kind of had to make a decision with the insurance and everything, like, okay, we're just going to take the money and just say this is done and walk away from Samoa forever, which was tempting because my life was kind of going in different roads. I was definitely following fishing more with my career than surfing. And so, but I love the place and I missed it. And I had so much, I mean, I still do. I'm going down there shortly, like end of the week or something for a swell.
I
So,
mean,
I mean, I
that
go
was
down there all the
home
time.
for so long.
Yeah, I mean, it still feels, I love it. It's gonna be till the day I can't walk around anymore like it's home for me as well.
I
So
can't
I'll always be
imagine.
going there. So
Honestly, like we've been
yeah,
places with the boat. Like we stayed, for example, like La Gomera. We lived there for 3 years, and Drake and I are always like, man, it's like part of our hearts, you know, like that's a part
yeah,
of you. And I mean, 15 plus years. That's a long
yeah. I mean,
time.
I have staff that work at the resort that knew me when I was like 18 years old, 17. They laugh
That's
at me now.
cool.
They're like, when I go down there with my girlfriend, and they're like telling her like, oh, I knew him when he was a little, and they're like, he was a pain in the ass.
I bet
I was
that's
a little
so
punk back
great.
then. But yeah, so
So y'all shipped the
whatever.
Merit.
Yeah, so yeah, I ended up after that tsunami, I ended up moving back to Samoa because we ended up rebuilding the whole resort, and I was like, I gotta be here and manage this, and we got to do it correctly. And I'm like, I'm gonna turn into a fishing surfing lodge, and so that was the deal, and started doing that for a little while down there. And then so I had him at that point sold the Cabo got sold in Fiji to a guy. It's still over there. I don't know what's going on with it nowadays, but and then got the Merit down there in Samoa. Sent it from Virginia to Samoa.
Oh my
Had
gosh.
it there for a few years, and then sent it to Kona. And now it's the boat I'm running now, and I'm owner operator. Um, and so the joys of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of joys with that type of
Oh
situation.
man,
Man,
yeah.
okay, already just like
So
the
there we go.
logistics. That was really good. I'm really impressed. Like, what are we? We're 10 minutes in and you've told us your entire life history. So good for you, Chris. You've completed the assignment.
Good, good.
The logistics behind shipping a boat already in itself is one thing, but like to go to bring, because you brought three total boats to the Southern
Yeah,
Pacific.
I shipped three boats down there. One was an
And
Ocean Master, one was a Cabo, and the third was the Merit. And none of them were shipped with like that yacht path or any of that. I had to deal with like, oh gosh, just giving me anxiety thinking about it. It
I'm
was just like
sorry.
dealing with shipping companies, and they're like, what do you want to do? And it was earlier in the stage where not a lot of people were shipping boats,
Yeah,
especially to that region. Or if they were going with yacht path or dockwise. I don't even think yacht path is around anymore, but they were the ones back there. I don't know, it was a while back. But anyways, yeah, it was a nightmare. Everything had to be shipped on top of all the containers, and it wasn't fun. I had all kinds of issues. That's a whole different world. Um, yeah, I mean, and then after all this, and the Merit gets to Honolulu, and I'm standing there, and they're offloading it off the boat in Honolulu, and this big gust of wind came, and it started swinging back and forth, and everybody started scattering. And
mm,
the guy, my agent that's standing there, is like grabbed me, and we're like hiding behind a minivan in the parking lot. And he's like,
stop.
he's like, start videoing with your camera because you're going to need this for the insurance company.
Stop.
And shit's like falling off the boat as it's like snap swinging.
Holy
And I'm like,
crap.
oh my God, all this. And here goes this Merit. There's going to be one less Merit. And I don't know, somehow they freaking got it under control, got it in the water. And I don't know, but yeah,
Oh
it's
my
shipping
gosh.
boats is I see so many people do it nowadays, and I think there's a lot more people involved like to help you do it, and it's still
Sure.
stressful even now. Like I
It's
can't
so
even.
stressful.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many pros and cons with shipping a boat. Sometimes you
Hmm.
can't avoid it, like when you're taking a Merit from Virginia to Honolulu.
Yeah.
But um but sometimes you can, and there's still like pros and cons, and people definitely decide to ship. But that, again, a conversation for another time, man. That, and then
Yeah, for
also
sure.
the logistics behind going into these places that there's not a lot of people going
Hmm.
to start a sport fishing operation and to create a successful charter business. Like,
Yeah.
that's super impressive. So definitely don't want to take
Yeah.
away from that, because I'm blown away by what you've managed to do. So
Thanks. Yeah.
um, tell us a little bit about the Kona fishery. Like, I like
Yeah.
to approach these podcasts assuming my listeners really don't know anything about sport fishing, and they want to learn. So big blue marlin over there.
Yes. Yeah. We have big blue marlin. Every year is different, but there's always a handful of really really nice ones caught out of here. Every year there's at least a few over the mark that are at least seen and hooked, and then a few
Over the
giants. But
mark is
yeah, it's over 1,000 pounds. Yeah. The last few years there's been a little bit of a slump where like there haven't been a lot weighed, but there's been a couple weighed in the last, and there was one last year, and then I think 2 years prior, Marlin caught one. But they're every year there's several people that see them. They're a pain in the ass to catch. They're
yeah,
not
they're
easy. They
hard.
they pull all the tricks. Yeah. And then obviously too, when you lose one, it always is a little bit bigger than what you think. So there's a lot of probably 800 pounders that get called over the mark, I would think sometimes. So you never know. But
That's
yeah,
still a
that's
really big fish.
yeah. But in
Goodness.
terms of like bigger, like nicer size fish, we get quite a few. I would say, things are changing a little bit with that Omni sonar stuff. Like there's going to be more numbers, but historically, if you're catching like through the season, like if I caught 11 over 500, I was pretty happy. That was pretty good. But again, that's probably going to start to change, I think, with the sonars because that thing's a weapon over here because it's
Yeah.
just like a
Oh,
lack
yeah.
of bait. It's flat calm, like we're fishing in a swimming pool, and there's not
So
a
you
lot
don't
of
even
targets
need
to
a,
get. No, you don't need a stabilizer, but people
yeah.
are putting them in there because they just putting them in there, whatever. But
Yeah.
if you go up off the ground, so if you go north, it can get a little lumpy. But
Okay.
for the most part, Kona, it's just you're fishing in a pool. It's like fishing for bass, but big blue marlin. So it's pretty cool in that regard. So that
Is
sonar
it,
is
yeah.
making a big difference.
And, but
Yeah.
you can find them, you can spot them, you can stay on them, and then you can just
Uh-huh.
watch them come up. So what
Hmm.
is the season summertime? Is it like June, July,
Yeah.
August?
Well, generally, like historically speaking, well, first off, like the one saying that's just like been true in Kona forever. It's like people are like, when should I come? When should I come? And everybody's like, come when you can come. Get on a flight when you can get here. There's big ones caught all the time. There's been a grander caught in every month of the year here. So if you look like at the records, every
That's
single month
amazing.
has a grander, 1,000 pounder caught in. I think December might be the one with the least amount. I think there might be like one or two in December. All the others have months. But if you look historically, though, the majority of them have been caught in that July, August time period. And so summertime. But like generally, a lot of people really like the spring. I've usually seen like my biggest fish of the year in the spring. The fishing can be like really hit and miss. Like it could be, you could go 5 days without a knockdown, nothing, and then you see a 750, an 800, something, pile on. So springtime, I think most people here that really want like very large blue marlin, they do like the spring. It's kind of like an quiet type of conversation. Like not everybody knows about it really, I guess. They think the summertime is when you would come, but spring, if you could put in the time, if you can only get to Kona for like 3 days, maybe spring's not the best, but if you can put in the time, there's usually a couple really giant ones seen in the springtime. And then as you start to get into the summer, we'll get like a run of rats around June usually.
How big
So
are the
smaller
rats?
blue marlin, they're like 150, 200 pounds maybe, yeah, somewhere in that range. And they'll start to kind of show up in more numbers, and then you'll pick through them and then catch a nice one here and there. And there'll be a lot more like 500 and 600 pounders caught through like that June, July period. All the tournaments run all through, well, they really run June, July, August as the final one in September, but the lion's share of the tournaments is all pretty much July. I don't get a lot of charters in July because I'm fishing mostly all those tournaments.
Hmm.
So my charters are like tournament charters, so not a lot of days in between it. And then you throw in the World Cup as well. So July is usually a really busy time. So like if people are asking me when they message me, I tell them, come in May, June, August, or early September. That's usually a really good time, but pretty much now all the way up until mid to late September. Yeah, can be
That's
can
so
be pretty
cool.
good. Yeah.
How big's the fleet ish?
Well, it's there's quite a few boats, but it's not giant. Gosh, I guess I could say there might be like 50 or 60 fishing boats, like that might run charters more like recreation. Well, I guess would be commercially kind of style. Like take paid charters or are out there more regular. But the actual boats that you'll see day in and day out, I would think might be more in the 20 to 30 numbers. And
Okay.
then there's days where you don't see really almost anybody. Um,
That's a good
and that,
sized fleet though.
yeah, yeah, some of those boats may only fish a little bit here and there, but I think any day you'll probably see between 10 to 30 boats would be what you would see out there. But like there's Kona's starting to shift a little bit. Like it's starting to turn into more of a private boat fishery. And there are charter boats, obviously, and like all the private boats charter, but the owners aren't like really pushing the charters. They're just kind of more like so the captains have some
Can,
days to go out and
yeah.
fish, and the crew don't go crazy sitting there cleaning the
Hmm.
boats. But it's starting to turn into a private boat fishery. Hawaii's just gotten insanely expensive. And, with like the sonar stuff and things changing, the owner operator thing is a really difficult thing to accomplish here. And then we also have a business out of Kona called Bite Me Sport Fishing, which is like it's like they got a bunch of boats, and it's kind of like cheap style, like you can pay like $100 and you'll share a charter with whoever, and they do all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of changed things a little bit there. They've been around for a while, but I kind of foresee it being a situation where you'll have basically the bite me charter boats, and then you're going to have just a lot of private boats.
Hmm.
So it is changing a little bit. And, so I would say, like, in terms of boats that are actually really out there professionally just blue marlin fishing and actually targeting it, there might only be really like 10 or 15 of us. Like, for
Okay.
instance, me, like, I only billfish, and I told my charters that when I first came to Kona, I wasn't that way because I was broke. I mean, I didn't have autopilot on the boat for like 2 years because I just couldn't afford it. I was just like, I mean, thank God I didn't have like a major breakdown, because I boat would have been for sale. Like, I was, by the time I got there and did everything, man, I was like balancing check. I mean, it was like
That's
I was so
stressful.
stressed.
Yeah.
And over years you make a little bit more, and then could afford an autopilot, could do this, and you work your way up. But so I was just fishing whenever I could. But now I'm in a situation where I'm lucky enough where I kind of I just bill fish, and I tell people
That's
right
awesome.
away. So when they call me or they text me, I'm like, hey, look, first off, understand, we are just bill fishing. If you want to just go catch fish, that's cool. I'll recommend some guys that
Mhm.
are really good at that. If you got like a bunch of kids with you, you got a 13-year-old with you that he's going to hate trolling around. Um, Let me send you with my buddy who's going to go out and catch you a bunch of sheebies, like little yellowfins or whatever. I want people to have a good
Yeah.
time. I don't want them to be out on the boat like,
Yeah,
whatever. And
for sure. Yeah.
so there's probably only a few of us that specifically more do that just focus on the bill fishing. And I think that if you really want to do it right here and like catch a majority of really nice ones, you do sort of have to more target them, instead of just pulling mixed spread and changing up halfway through the day to go try something different or whatever.
Ooh, I want to get into that.
Yeah.
But first, I want to
Yep.
hear about, like, it seems like Kona has, I mean, there's some good fishing there, ahi,
Uh huh.
ono,
Yeah.
excellent stuff, reef, all that stuff. But what is the like marlin culture? Because there seems to be a very deep marlin culture in Kona.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's got a really deep history in marlin fishing. I mean, every year I learn more stuff about the history of it. And, before any of this social media, any of this stuff, I mean, there were guys out there doing just insane stuff, and you never even heard about it. And like, there's guys I'll see, like, I've known them there, and they do something different now. They work somewhere else or whatever. Or I, surfed with them for a while and never even knew they fished. And then someone will tell me a story like, oh yeah, that guy caught like 3 over 800 in this tournament, went back out and caught a grander and did, and like all this crazy, like all these different stories. And you're like, that guy? You're like,
What?
what the heck? Like, the dude doing that? Like, what? It's just like there's so many like tigers in that harbor that you just don't know about. They're very humble, or they're quiet, or you never knew, or like, Instagram, Facebook, all that, it's changed fishing in that way, because unless it's on a post or something, you don't even know about it really. But there's just such a history here. I mean, it goes back so long, to the early days of the Parker, tube lure that caught a grander and all this stuff. So there's that rich history, and it's beautiful that way. There's a lot of ego here. There's probably the most ego I've seen anywhere I've ever been. So there's a little bit of that side to it, and there's just a bit of big fish mentality here. Like, that's what a lot of us are wanting to target and find out there. And there's a chance of like the giant one showing up whenever. Um, so yeah, I mean, really, the culture's been lure fishing forever. And there's a bit of there's not a lot of change that happens here. There's a lot of like stubbornness to certain ways that have worked, and they continue to work. So why change it, right? But there's kind of like the old way, and there's only like little adjustments, and there's a Kona way of doing things. And you'll go and jump on other boats in different parts of the world, and it's not very different, but there is a certain way. You can jump on 10 different boats in Kona, and they're all doing something, pretty much they're all doing the same thing. Where, if you go to different places of the world, everybody has their own little spin off on things, or people are doing different, whatever. And so there is kind of like a Kona way of doing stuff. And generally, that Kona way of doing stuff is like big, loud, heavy tackle, manly, ego kind of centric, big fish oriented, like, and that's cool. That's what this place is kind of about. So it's funny when you get people that want to come here and like catch mahi or something, because it's like, I don't understand. Go to the Keys. I don't know. Go go to Mexico. What are we doing here? Like, so I always kind of chuckle, but I do understand people just want to catch fish sometimes. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, they've
just
never experienced an
yeah,
800-pound blue marlin. I assure you
yeah,
that that's definitely generally the case. That's not even something that could even cross their mind, what it
yeah,
takes
yeah,
to
yeah,
do
yeah.
that.
That's
So,
true.
you mentioned the Kona mentality, how everyone is doing similar things,
Yes,
and that it's deep in the culture, and that shows. So, Kona, from what I understand, Kona is known as a lure fishery, and that's what
yes,
I really want to
100%.
talk to you about today. Is
Yeah.
really kind of diving into lures, because my personal experience in the sport fishing space has been primarily light tackle. Heavy tackle has been more bluefin. We did a season in Madeira for looking for the grander. We didn't find her. Drake
Hmm.
swears he saw her. But there was another fish in the spread. I was laughing when you were saying that. But there was another fish in the spread at the time. Hit our long. It was a good one. I mean, she was upward 600, right? And
Yeah.
hit our long, and we got her. And Drake's like up there on the bridge just yelling, and we're like, "What is going on?" We had no idea there was another fish back there, and he was like,
Oh wow.
that was the fish." And that was really, I
Oh
mean,
wow.
I didn't see it, but that was July 3rd too. He was like,
Oh no.
I know where she is. We'll be back tomorrow." And we didn't see
Yeah.
anything. But anyway, so I have some heavy tackle experience,
Hmm.
but very little lure knowledge. We pull teasers in Costa Rica. We're super proficient bait and switch, and pulled a little bit of lures in Madeira. We did like a mixed spread, teasers in the shorts, and then lures in the longs. But so
Sure.
what are the different types of? There's so many different types of lures out there. Can you
Yeah.
give us like a general rundown, like what types of lures there are, the difference between manufacturing and like handmade lures? There's a lot of lure makers out of Kona. Some of our favorites are out of Kona.
Hmm.
And yeah, so take the wheel, Chris.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, oh boy, that's it. This is a loaded question. Like, there's so much there. But we'll try and generalize it. There's a few like basic shapes, and then from those shapes, there's like all kinds of spin-offs, right? So you kind of have what a plunger. I grabbed a couple lures real quick from in
Yes.
my garage. So
Awesome.
a plunger. So this is a big one. This is a Lee Simmons one, but this is a bigger plunger, kind of like what Joe Yee called the super plunger. Um, and so you could see it kind of has like a taper right here, kind of comes down a little more taper.
Mm-hmm.
So plunger meaning it plunges, it pops down, it goes down in the water, it'll go down deeper. And then the longer head kind of makes it act a little bit more like a tube in a way. But that plunging kind of drives it down, so you're going to have more downtime in the cycle. And like generally, these are like pretty consistent with their pop. Like, you can almost count it like a pop, and then one, two, three, four, five, six, pop, one, two. They're generally like pretty consistent in how their action is, and they're fun to watch. They're like a pretty good, just like that do their thing, plunge, pop, do their thing. So that's a plunger. And then, from that head shape, there's like all kinds of different things. There's lungers, there's different variations of plungers, there's sharper cut plungers. So the cut is the face, by the way, like when we're talking about a cut on a lure. So there's like, different cuts on it. There's people that might add like a scoop to it. There's different steepnesses of how it plunges down there. So there's so many variations, but the plunger is one style of lure. Then you have a tube lure. I did grab a tube lure. Here we go. There's a tube lure, um, which is pretty simple shape. It's the first lure because it was a simple shape. And this is more of like a historical style type tube, like a Henry Chi one, like that they were making out of like bar glasses and stuff. This is a Koya. that he just did like a one-off for me on it, but it's kind of your more historical type of tube, and they've evolved into, here's a tantrum tube, which is made out of acrylic, or a type of like acrylic type material. Um, and you know, but as the name states, it's a tube, you know.
Right,
So
right.
and
What's this story about the bar glasses?
yeah, so um, gosh, I don't want to butcher the story too much, but it had something to do with, I think they were like sitting at the Kona Inn, and I think back when I think it was Henry Chi and gosh, I can't think of who else, but they were basically looking at ways to make lures, and he grabbed a bunch of bar glasses in the back there that they were going to be throwing out or something, and put resin in them, and was able to basically create a lure off the glass, and then they cut it to whatever angle it was. And the reason like the original like tube lures and stuff, they're all at like a certain angle. They're all set at that one angle. And the reason for that angle was back then, the tool that they were using to cut it, it was only made at that angle. So that's why they cut it at that angle, and then it worked. And I wish I had all the stories in front of me right now so I could like
No,
elaborate
you're
and go into
good.
details, because it's really
That's
cool.
so
But like
cool.
people that are interested in that type of stuff, Jim Rizzuto is a really good guy. He's passed away, but he wrote a lot of books. He's a good guy to look up. Like you could just Google him and look up some of his literature, and he's done a lot of historical stuff on lures. There's also a good book that Joe Yee didn't write it, but somebody wrote it for Joe Yee, and it's about him and about lures. And there's a bunch of good books about lures, and it's really really interesting when you start to dive into the subject and hear all the different things. But Jim Rizzuto's got some great stories. So if
That's
anyone's
cool.
interested to kind of
You,
elaborate, you could check out his books. Probably
well,
find
I'll
them
tag
online.
some. Tell me, put some of your favorite books in the description. We'll get together
Okay.
on that, and I'll add
Yeah,
that.
we
So
could
if
do
you
that.
guys are listening, check out the description. I'll link some of those books in there, and you can check it out a little bit more. So we got the plunger, which plunges with
Yeah,
some
so
more
you have a plunger, you
downtime.
have a tube blower. So a tube blower is going to kind of stay more on the surface, and we like to call it mole hilling. And they're not all going to do that, but when we're talking about mole hilling, it's kind of like it just like pushes a bulb of water in front of it all the time, and it'll kind of do like a little tight wiggle as it's pushing this ball of water in front of it, and it just stays on the surface, just pushing water, and every once in a while it'll kind of push a little bit more, but it really does what we call molehill. But some of the tubulars will do more of like kind of like a skidder right on the surface and really like just explode a bunch of water. They're really aggressive lures. And the only downside of a tubular is they're hard to pull in rough water. So a lot of people
Mm.
like on the East Coast could struggle pulling these. What's his name? Eric at Aloha Lures. That smash bait is probably one of the few. Him and the Crampton baits, I think, can handle the rough a bit in terms of a tubular. But yeah, they're hard to pull in rough water.
Which
Again,
is why
that's
they're
why
so
like
great in
Kona.
Kona.
Exactly, and that's why like it's such a good lure fishery, because we just have flat calm and we just sit there and stare at lures. So we're all like lure snobs, and everybody's got their own thing, and everybody's got their own opinions on it, and it's, yeah, you're just like staring at lures all day, which is, it's fun. It's like playing with toys. You're just like, it's exciting, and it's
You
I
can
have too
dress them
many of
up
these
however you
things. Yeah,
want.
exactly, right. um and then, yeah, then you have like, I mean, it goes into all kinds of areas. You have like flat, like just like a flat head, like a hard head or something, like a Moldcraft wide range or something. And now there's a lot of guys that make them with just a resin. And then you have just like variations to, like this is a ruckus, a
Ah,
Marlin Magic ruckus. Everybody
I
knows a ruckus, right?
love the ruckus.
Yeah, I mean, it may, and for what it's called, I mean, it makes a ruckus,
Mm.
these things are killer. But yeah, that's kind of their own type of a shape. Like you couldn't really say, oh, this is a plunger, this is a tube. I guess it might be more along on the lines of like a lunger or something. But
Okay.
there's just so many variations to what there are. And then even these ruckuses, like they make them in like a hard cut, they make them in a soft cut, they make them in whatever, which people don't really know about. But you can ask for it or try and find them. But the regular just ruckus you get off the shelf is the one that most people are catching fish on. But in Kona, there is one that's like a harder cut, which we would call like a Kona cut or a hard cut lure, and that's just a steeper angle on the face, and it's just a lot more aggressive. But again, it's a lot harder to run. You got to really kind of adjust it in the rigger and everything. So, but yeah, I mean, you have that. Then you have like scoop face lures, cup face lures, like the and then here's a classic scoop face lure. I I caught my grander on this, not this actual one in my hand. That one's up on the wall, but this model. And so yeah, you have like your scoop style lures, which are awesome. And this old shape that they were using for a long time back in the day, and I think they had them, all kinds of different sizes and shapes. And the thing about those two is like back when they used to troll the old like wooden sand pans, they couldn't go very fast. So they needed lures that could like do a lot of action. So like when you start getting into those more like plungers and lures that like need a little bit more skill in pulling them and stuff, they can't handle like really slow speeds. But back in the day, like the sampans and stuff, they would make them, they would do these. So sampan is like the old trolling boats that they had here. They were like wood
Okay.
boats with like
Yeah, I
a
was
big.
gonna ask. I was like, I don't know what a sampan
Yeah,
is.
they're weird looking. Like the exhaust isn't out the back of the boat. They had like an exhaust sticking up out of the top. They were the old
Okay, like a
original,
stack.
like yeah, like old banana looking boats, kind of like the albacore boats in the Carolina fishery or whatever. They're like old historical. There's still like two of them here, and they fish every once in a while. They're like old
That's cool.
classics.
And how
But
fast? So like
I
how
think they were
fast were they
trolling.
going?
I believe they were like 6 knots or
Oh,
something
that
like that.
is
They're pretty
quite
slow,
slow.
yeah.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so anyways, and so the issue they had was getting action out of the lures, because if you're going too slow, some of those tube lures, like they get lazy, they'll act weird. Um, so I think they were adding, they were doing these scoop type lures, or they had these other ones. I think they were called crocodiles or something like that back in the day. They were just like a really long head with a crazy cut on it. So they were just trying to get as much action out of these things as they could going slow. I have to say that like Kona back in the day originally wasn't a lure fishery. It was a live bait fishery, and they would mess around with lures and stuff, but really it was a live bait fishery. People would grab a bait, they'd go up on the grounds, they'd fish the grounds, and everything's changed now. Everyone's fishing south now. No one, I mean, there's guys that fish the grounds, but a majority of big fish are caught down south. Um, but yeah, it was different. So they would catch a bait, and then they would pull it off the ledge, and they'd be up off the grounds, and they would catch their fish off live baits, off tunas and stuff. So that was that fishery. But it started to change over time, and I think Bart Miller had a lot to do with that too, because in between they would catch their live baits, they'd fish their live baits in the morning, and then in the afternoon they would kind of have to do something. So he would pull lures, and he would kind of hone his lure pulling skills, and he started catching a lot of fish, and they started catching more fish on his lures. And then the fishery started to change from that point on. I think that was also a transition where things started to go into more lure fishing, and then the bait piles started getting harder to find, and the fishing started getting really good down south, which there's not as readily available akus and baits to catch and drag off the ledge, and the lure fisheries just expanded over time. But anyways, that was kind of going off on a tangent there. But yeah, they the scoop lures. The thing about those lures, they're awesome. They're really good lures. They're very aggressive, but you're not going to catch a lot of fish on them just because of the way that the fish feed on them, because they're so erratic and they move around a lot of times. You'll notice if you have one, there's not too often where you'll have a fish just pile on and get hooked. It's usually like smacks it out of the rigger and then comes back, and you'll hook them on the second attempt. So for me these days, I think it's a tremendous teaser lure. I pull it without a hook, but when I used to pull a hook in it, I would get a lot of bites, but I would also miss a lot of fish or pull hooks on a lot of fish just because of the nature of those scoop style lures.
And
So
the way it's swimming,
the way
essentially.
it's swimming, exactly. So the way that they eat it, and the way that where the hook could be when they pile on. And it sounds, in my mind, it sounds funny because they're eating tunas and all these fish that are swimming all over the place. So you would think that would be no problem, but I just think the way they eat it, you just don't get the best hookup rate. But I get so many bites on those things, it's insane. I have one in my
It's
spread
pretty cool.
forever.
I mean,
Yeah.
I could see how that would simulate a kind of like a injured bait fish,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
I feel like
what
it
they're looking
does.
for.
Yeah, and I
Um,
feel like it does like its own set of teasing because it's not doing just the same motion all the time. Those things
mhm.
just have a mind of their own. So if the fish is sitting there looking at it and all of a sudden it does some weird thing just because it catches a wave different, I've seen fish sit under that lure and just looking at it and we're watching the fish and the lure does something and it's just like instant boom and he's just
Can't
on it.
help it. Can't
Yeah,
help it.
so I think it just has that vibration to it and reaction bite it invokes.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
I love that you just you mentioned that, well, I don't really generally pull this one with a hook. I pull this one as a teaser because of
yeah,
this. So
hmm
when you're picking lures for your spread with hooks,
hmm
what are you looking for? Like, what you want something that makes noise. You want something that the is going to induce a bite from the fish but also have the hook sitting in the right spot. So, what do you look
yeah.
for?
Well, you know, I change that all the time, and over the last few years, I've definitely changed my spreads around a little bit. But I'll go over like a generalization of sort of what you would what a spread would kind of design to be like, right? So generally what you'll want is have your most aggressive lures up front, so your closest lures to the boat, behind your teasers, behind your dredges, whatever. You want a loud, aggressive, like a tube style lure. Generally that closest lure would probably be your biggest lure. So just a really aggressive type lure. A plunger would be a little bit farther back, so more of a tube or one of those scoop face lures, or like one of those big poi dogs or something like that, right? Something up close, loud, aggressive, and then as you go back in the spread, you kind of slowly taper off the aggression. So the next position back could maybe be a plunger, and then on your rigger you may want something that's a little bit more like of a just a straight popper, just a flathead or a cup face lure or something like that. And then going all the way back to then bullets. We always have bullets in the spread here in Kona. A lot of people think that's like a tuna bait, and a bullet is this is a bullet. And a
Is
lot of
that the
people,
shape of the head? Because like our bullets are
yeah,
often, I mean, we have ones a
there's
few
so
about
many
that size,
different
but
bullets. Like,
I like
here's
those little ones for the shotgun.
so you
Oh,
know
wow, look
um,
at that one.
so this is a 9 inch one. This is I probably catch more fish on this than anything in terms of a bullet. Like if I need to just catch fish, I put out a Koya 9 plus. This is a 9 plus. And then there's this one. There's so many variation of bullets too. And then there's this little bomb boy one, which is pretty
It's
famous,
pretty cool.
little pinky. But yeah, the bullets are huge here in Kona. And I know a lot of places people are like, oh yeah, bullets are kind of just for tunas and stuff, but we catch majority of our marlin on them, and they work. I
Majority.
brought them. Yeah, I think so. I honestly would say we catch a lot of them on there. It's surprising, whatever the reason is. And I've gone to other places, and I used to always say like, oh, they'll work like that everywhere, and they don't work the same. I don't know what it is, and it sounds so silly, and it's just counterintuitive, but like they don't work the same as they do in Kona. They'll catch billfish anywhere in the world, but for some reason in Kona, sometimes they just want bullets. Like every boat in Kona has a bullet in the spread every day, no matter
That's
what.
fascinating.
Even on World Cup day, there's a bullet in the spread. I caught some giant ones on those things. So yeah, it's weird because you look at the size of it. The biggest problem with the bullet is that it's so small that when the big ones come up on it, they push it out, and so you always get like a
Mm,
crappy bite sometimes on it. Um,
because they're
but
pushing so much
they
water.
push so much water, yeah, and you get this thing come up on the stinger. But I think what happens sometimes, and I'll go back to your question there, but I think what
Yeah.
happens sometimes with the bullets is they'll come up on a big lure up close, and maybe they're just not. They might have missed it, or they looked at it, and now that I'm bait and switch fishing there, I'm looking at the fishery way different than I ever did. It's changed my mind. It's changed like all my perceptions on Kona fishing has changed in the last like year and a half.
Is that how
And
long you've been bait and switching there?
yeah, pretty much. Well, I guess I shouldn't say a year and a half. I'll be like a half a season, and then so half a season, I guess. So maybe not a year and a half, but I've been fully do it, like committed to it for half a season. But a year and a half, I've been kind of gradually getting into it. But that's changed my perception on what these fish are doing here. And so I think maybe they're coming up on those shorts and you don't see them, and they may just be looking at it and they're just not ready for it, or maybe they have a half-hearted bite and you just didn't even see it or whatever, and then that bullet comes past them, and it's just such an easy meal. It's like a low-hanging fruit, so they just
Yeah.
pile on. So I think that's
The
what happens sometimes, and we're just saying they love bullets, but I don't know. It could be it's just a smaller, easier way out the back bait, you know.
that's really interesting. I have a question because you mentioned that you get those like rats that come in around May, late spring, early summer. Do you see I'm just speculating here. Do the rats generally feed more aggressively? Like are they gonna be more prone to hitting those closer
It,
lures than
um,
the ones out there?
yeah, I mean, they go through phases of how they feed, and there's sometimes where they're feeding so aggressive, they're just like they're not even opening their mouths. It's almost like they're being territorial, which
Mm.
I've heard. That's a whole nother conversation. You could have a whole podcast on that, because some people think they're like being territorial right before the spawn or something, and then
Yeah,
I've heard people say that they're whacking baits to feed the females below them, and I've heard all kinds of stuff, right?
that's
I
cute.
don't know what's the yeah, I like that idea. That sounds
That's
interesting, but
sweet.
um, I don't know if that's what they're really doing. I think that
Right.
I generally, when I see them doing that whacking thing where they're not, and they're really aggressive, but they're just not eating very good, there's always like a
Mhm.
lot of flying fish and small bait around. And I think that's more so how it is if they're just like hitting stuff and there's a lot of bait around, so they're not like committing. But they go through stages. They go through like phases of how they feed, and when they're aggressive, they'll eat anything. They'll come up and eat. Like, I mean, I used to pull this huge, stupid big teaser, and I've had like 180, like 100 pounders, 80 pounders come up and be all over it, and I'm like, what are you doing? No, that's not for you. Go away. And so you don't, they're very aggressive, and that what does happen though, like you'll sometimes during that time, that is when like the females are spawning here, so you might mark a really big one, and you'll be like trying to get that big one to bite, and you'll get like a crazy aggressive bite, and if you didn't see the bite, you might be like, oh, that's her or whatever, but
Yeah.
sometimes
Heart
the
stops.
little ones that are they're
Hmm.
around that female, they come up and mess with you, and you hook one of those, and then you're like, ah, dang it, and that's the case. But they are pretty aggressive for the most
That's
part. The little ones that come in, they'll eat everything in the pattern when they're
everything.
feeding. Yeah,
We
everything. I
have
mean,
we had one like in Costa Rica. We were pulling a double XL poi dog. It's like our favorite lure.
oh
When
yeah,
when Drake and I got married, we had two separate people give us wedding gifts that were
yeah.
double XL poi dogs.
Oh, awesome! I love that lure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good one. But we had one in
yeah.
particular that I actually have one here that was one of our wedding gifts. It's got a
Oh, the
fish head
fish
in
head
it.
one. He doesn't do those
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah, hold on to that
No.
one.
Yeah, this one
Yeah.
does not go behind the spread.
No,
But
hold on to that one.
we had one that man we couldn't keep it. This one is also doesn't go behind the spread anymore, but this thing
Oh, that
just
took
like
some beatings, huh?
it took some
Yeah.
beatings, but from these little blue marlin in
Yeah.
Costa Rica, they couldn't get enough of this one. You mentioned aggressive and loud.
Hmm.
So, can you just
That
explain
right
a
there.
little bit is
That's a
aggressive and loud? Yeah.
super aggressive and loud, and just it's pushing
Moving
water,
water.
splashing, moving. It's making noise. If you're thinking like if you were just sitting in there in the ocean swimming around, and there was no boat or anything, and that thing came past you, and you were even underwater, you'd hear it coming from a ways away, and you'd see it coming from a ways away, as opposed to like one of these bullets. You probably wouldn't hear anything until it was right up on you, and you wouldn't see anything until it was right up on you. So you got to think of it in terms of that fish. They're in the water, and that's coming from a while. It's going to grab their attention, and they're also way more sensitive to vibration and sound. With
Mhm.
the way their air structures, where their ear structures set up, and the way it all works with their swim bladders and how everything works. Like they're feeling all this happening before they're seeing it, and they know you're there before they actually have sight on it. So those really aggressive, loud type things, I think, gets their attention and brings them up into the spread. And whether or not they eat that lure, it doesn't mean that lure didn't bring them into the spread. So like you may have a
Yes.
lure that you pull every day, and they doesn't get bit every day, but you're getting bit a lot, and you may not even know it. But the reason you're getting bit every day is that lure they're not eating is raising them. And
Yep.
so I'm like always been like a big advocate of big lures anywhere in the world. Like when I go in Cabo and I fish the Bisbees, that double X poi dog caught so many like little baby marlin like they have over there and raised so many fish. I'm like, okay, well, even if they're not
It's a
eating it,
good
it's
lure.
raising them. Yeah. And they might come up and look at it and then there's something better for them and they'll pile on. So I'm a big fan of big lures anywhere you're at for the most part.
So I like that you mentioned that the bullets, they don't pull the same in Kona as they pull everywhere else in the world. Like they pull very distinctly different. You say you like the big lures and the way they pull in other places as well as Kona. What like what are some factors that could, you mentioned the swimming pool like conditions. What are some factors that affect pulling a lure, and what should somebody look for, and how do they like kind of adjust how a lure might pull if they want to keep that lure in the spread but it's doing something a little off? What are some ways that you can kind of finagle or work with a lure to make it pull a little better? Because depending on like your outrigger size, where the lure is in the spread, how fast you're going, the boat, how much draft the boat's pushing,
Hmm.
what are some, everything's going to be different. So what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, there's a lot to that there. Yeah, I mean conditions are big. That's going to make a big difference on the lures you're going to pull. Like when it gets rough, there's just certain lures that you just can't pull them. Doesn't matter how low you pull them in the rigger, doesn't matter what you do. At some point, you're being counterproductive because you're basically going against what that lure is supposed to be doing. So if it you can't force it. That's a thing like I learned with lures. Like even it might be your favorite lure, or you just bought this lure and it's like so pretty and you want to get it out there. But like, look, if it's not running right, it's not running right. Sorry, take it out of the spread. Put something else out there. If it's skipping, if it's bouncing, if it's like doing something weird. And I hate to say it, but like a lot of these lures that are hand sanded, sometimes you get a bad lure and you can't
Yeah.
tell until it takes years and years to really be able to like pick up a lure and look at it and like have an idea like, okay, this one's going to pull hard. This side, or this is going to do something weird, or, oh, I don't like the, it's kind of hard. And if you're buying them just whatever, like you don't know. So sometimes you could get a bad lure that just pulls to one direction or just doesn't act correctly. And then sometimes you get a magic one that no matter what, it just gets killed. It's just hammered, and then you lose it, and you try and get the same one. It doesn't act the same way.
And then you spend
So
the rest of your life crying yourself to sleep.
yeah, yeah. So it's every lure's got its own personality. You really can't force it so much, but you can persuade them to do what you want it to do. So like what I'll do, we use a really heavy leader. We use that Momoy extra hard 530, right? So not everybody's going to use that. So you're not going to be able to influence the lure as much as we can with that leader. But the leader here, I got actually one rigged as a teaser with I think 530. Yeah. So maybe I can explain it a bit better. So this one does not have a hook on it, but it's got the leader, right? So you have your memory, right? When you buy leader, it's in a coil and it's just always going to have that memory. I guess unless you like did something, I don't know how you could erase that. But anyway, so it's always got its memory. So like when you rig your lure, the coil's going to come out. If you just let it sit naturally, it's going to come out one way or another. Like it could be like that, it could be like that, it could be like that, right? So generally a neutral position to just make your lure run what it was made to do. Don't mess with it, just see what it does. It's just having this come straight over the top. So it's just pulling the loop is just coming straight over the top. So it's pulling like that, right?
How
If
cool.
it's this way, the lure's gonna run terrible. It's just not going to do the right stuff.
So if it's pointed
If
down, it's not good. If it's curling down, it's
Yeah,
not going
if
to do
your
well.
coil's like that, it's going to run really bad. And then this also goes into why it's so important to have like a rubber stopper on the back or like a toothpick so you can fix the lure in position. I've jumped on some really, really good boats before and seen they have nothing back there, and it just that lure is going to do weird stuff because it's going to hit a wave and the hook rig's going to move and it's there's so many little tweaks. I mean, and I say this because we're literally staring at lures 8 to 10 hours a day in a
Uh-huh.
swimming pool. And we go long stretches without bites. So we don't have a lot to do, but just sit there and stare at these things. It's clean blue water. So we see every little thing. So it's like if there's a little piece of vinyl that's come off, we can tell by the way the lure's running. Like there's so much to it. So that coil makes a big difference. So yeah, generally just a neutral position would be to have it come just straight over the top like that. And then what you can do is adjust it. If you want it to run out to a certain way, you can move that coil ever so slightly. So it's kind of like a leash to a dog or something. So like, kind of like that. And it's going to pull that lure that way. I wouldn't go all the way that way because you'll end up getting that lure will go so far that way. It'll like snap back. It'll like come in and do like
That's
weird
wild. That's wild that it
fishing.
has such an
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah. But like if you're fishing in the really, really rough, it's hard to see. I mean, you're just trying to get those things in the water. So
Yeah.
because I fished when I fished in like Cabo and some of those like hurricanes and stuff. I'm just trying to get those lures in the water. I mean, it's just like whatever. So, these are, but if you know what they should be doing, and then you can kind of like, that if I do the lure, if I put the coil on this lure here, it's going to do this, like, then you can definitely adjust them a bit. So that'll make a difference. That'll pull it a little bit. And then the other thing you could use too, and when obviously if you have like a stiff rig, when you turn this leader like that, the hook's going to change its position. So what you will basically want to do is have it where your leader's like that and your hook's straight down or whatever, or wherever your hook's oriented, and then you move this where you want, and then you could shove like a toothpick in there, we'll hold it in that position, and then you don't have to move the whole hook rig. And then obviously too, like the hook, we always like to run, I don't have a hook rig with me right now, I should have grabbed one, but we always like to run the hook on these on the slant face lures. We always like to run the hook down. So like,
Interesting.
yeah, not up. We like them down, and it basically works as a rudder. It stabilizes the lure. So if you have a lure that's running like crazy erratic, try running the hook down. So meaning like the bend and the point is here and then
Mm-hmm.
comes up that way. So we run them down. But scooped face lures, I'll vary it depending. They're all a little different. I generally like having the hook up on the scoop lures, and on like cup, like lures with a cup or a flat lure, you have the hook up because it's generally going to try and go to that position. So if it doesn't have an orientation, it might just make your lure run kind of funny. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, so
I
hook down creates a rudder, creates stabilization, and helps kind of keep it more of a straighter. You get better bites that way, I
That's
feel
definitely
like.
what our mate. So we brought a mate in that had lure fished pretty proficiently into
Yeah,
Madeira, and he was telling me that. And I have a question for you. Now, keep in mind I'm a circle hook fisherman.
sure.
Why wouldn't you like? Is it just like atrocious to think about pointing the hook to the side?
No, you can
Just
point
seems
it to the side, but you're gonna
like to the
and
inside of the spread.
yeah, you can point it either way you want. The problem with doing that, and I'll do like that was the next thing I was going to say is the hook on lures like that with a big single hook in it. If we're talking single hook, it's a rudder pretty much. So as you move the orientation of where that is, you're going to affect the way that lure swims. So
That's
if
cool.
I have my bottom hook, if I turn it all one way, it's going to steer really, really good that like hard that direction. So if you take a single hook and you turn it all the way on its side, that lure is going to pull really hard to one side or the other. Um, so that would be your issue. And personally, I don't know how much of a difference it would make in terms of like hookups, because it's like, I mean, I run the hook down on almost all my lures, and we're always hooking them in the top of the face here. And you would think that if they're coming in and eating like they would a bait or something like this, you'd be hooking them in the bottom of the jaw. And that's why a
Mm.
lot of people don't like to run, like, not a lot of people, but there are people that have had this argument with where they're like, well, you're just going to hook them in the bottom of the jaw. But no, it hooks them up top here. So, I mean, it's a train wreck when it's like, we don't know how it happened. I mean, someone told me the other day, it's like porcupines having sex. Like we don't know how it happens, but it happens.
It
And
happens.
so it happens some. So they're exploding on the thing. But I think Gene Vanderhook had a theory where right before they actually eat it, it rolls. So when they eat it, it actually
Mm.
rolls a little bit. So the hook point is
Because it's moving water.
turning. Yeah, so it's turning a little bit, and that's what was his theory on that. But there's a million ways to do this. So it's
That's
more
so
so,
interesting.
Yeah.
So your toothpick, you mentioned the stopper, which is
Yeah,
essential.
stopper or a toothpick. Yeah, either or. And then yeah, toothpick. You could toothpick the front to kind of move where the leader's at. There's a couple different ways of doing it, but that's the easiest way, I think.
What about like moving it up on its position in the outrigger, like the halyard? Like
Yeah, sure.
when would you do that? Like,
You're gonna want to change that all day, pretty much, depending on what your tack is, what your conditions are like. So every boat's got a different wave signature. So there's certain lures that work on some boats, and there's certain lures that don't work on some boats because of what you got in the wave. So like you're creating something that you want it basically surfing down a wave. Every lure is going to work a little bit different on different parts of the wave. Um, the higher you have it towards the tip of that wave, the more aggressive and pushing it's going to be. And as you go lower, it'll get lazier. And then if you go off the back of the wave, it'll get very, very lazy, or like very not lazy, but it'll calm down a little too much sometimes. So you never really want to put it on the back of a wave. Unless it maybe was like super rough and you just really wanted to run this lure, you could try that.
mm,
But I would usually just as it gets rough, I'll bring it down the face of the wave a little more, even to almost where the hole of the wave is there. You can bring it down to the bottom part. As it's calmer, I'll go higher up in it. And then every lure, like I said, every lure reacts differently. And it's hard to just explain that in a conversation, but like it just takes years of knowing, like, okay, now I know what that lure looks like when it gets bit. And so you know what it looks like when it gets bit. So you want to try and make it look that way. And it honestly could be a matter of adjusting it like like a half a foot or something. And it just makes a difference. Especially if your boat has big wakes. I fished on some boats that have really, really big waves, and uh, they run differently on it. My little Merritt, it's got the waves are good, but it's not like really, really big waves. It's a very like calm spread back there. So like I don't do too good on like a plunger as much as I do on like a tube with that boat. I just find like aggressive lures get bit more on that boat for me, and it's finding that what works for you and what's working on each wave there. So I would adjust it throughout the day, and then like obviously like if you're sitting there and you're hearing like your riggers like ding 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 because the lure's skipping at any point or
mm.
like coming out just doing this, like that drives me crazy. Like you got like that needs to be addressed. You don't want your lure doing that. I don't care if it's like the best lure ever. If you can't get that thing to run without doing that, it's just I'm sorry, you gotta take it out and put something else there that'll run in that
So if the
condition.
lure is spending time out of the water, it needs to
Yeah.
sit the bench.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Try and adjust it on the wave, try and adjust the angle of the pull. But at some point, you're going to start, like I said, being counterproductive to what that lure is supposed to do. If it's a lure that's really aggressive, you want a high pull on it. You want an angle that's like high out of the water. So if you're like bringing it down where it's almost a flat line and it's not doing what it's supposed to do, then you're kind of being counterproductive. You're better off putting something out there that like would thrive on that angle. And then so yeah, it's just adjusting it through the day. I mean, we're lucky like in Kona that our conditions don't change too much through the day. You might have like a little bit of morning sickness as we come around Kaiwi Point in the morning. There's like a reverberation off that point, and then if you're going south, once you get past that, you're like in flat calm for most of the day. You might get a light onshore breeze at the end of the day, but it doesn't change a lot. So sometimes I don't even have snap swivels. I just crimp everything onto a regular swivel, so I don't change my lures that much. But
That's pretty
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So it's just everywhere's different, and you're gonna have to just kind of know what works. And if you have a lure that keeps getting bit, just make a mental note of like, this is what it looks like when it gets bit. And I mean, people know what I'm talking about if they've had that
Yeah.
happen, and they just know
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, and they're like, this thing's gonna get bit. It's doing what it does. So trying to get them to do that every day is like, that's the that's a little difference in Kona. I think where some boats excel past other boats is like constantly tweaking and getting the lures to be in the best spot ever. And
Yeah.
it may only equate to a few more bites a year, but that's a few more bites a year. So what if one of those was a
The
90
bite.
or 1200 or you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot to it. I think it's funny when people say like, oh, all lures are the same at 8 knots or whatever. And it's like, well, you really haven't
Ooh.
fished Kona then, because I've
Yeah.
heard that. I hear that all the time. They're like, just
That's
put a couple
interesting.
mold crafts out there. And, I mean, I get it, but there is a lot to lure fishing if you're actually going to really like pursue lure fishing, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
we all know blue marlin eats some stupid things. We've seen that. But day in and day out, if you want to get more bites than other people, you got to figure out your lure fishing game. Even if you're not putting hooks in them, that
Yeah.
you still want to raise the fish. So yeah,
That's my favorite. That's my favorite.
yeah.
What's your opinion on like? Okay, give me the scoop on plastic skirts versus vinyl skirts, rubber skirts.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Yeah. Well, I have a little bit different, like unconventional, I thoughts on that. But most
Let's hear
people
it.
here like vinyl. Most people in Kona all love vinyl. Again, it's a tradition here, and just things don't die out here very, new things don't get caught with a lot of resistance here, and even rubber skirts. So the vinyl is just the name of the game here, and I can understand why. It does have a better transition. Like there's not a lot of bulk to it, so it does have a pretty good transition when they feed on it. Um, and I've heard so many different theories. I've heard that the sound that it makes through the water, the vinyl itself is a sound that they like. I don't know if that's true or not. Heard that, because it's slippery, it's a little bit better transition. And I don't know. Some lures do run better with vinyl. You just got to figure out what works for you. For me personally, I like a rubber skirt with just not a double rubber skirt. I like this rubber skirt with a couple newels underneath it, and there's like nothing there for that fish to, it just slides right through. The lure runs good. You still have different colors. And then I like the rubber skirts. They're more durable, for me at least. And I find like I have better color variations. Now, with that being said, Frothy's making those like colorful vinyl, like fish print vinyl. That's pretty cool. I hear a lot of people liking that. So that's cool.
It's
Before
pretty
we only
cool.
had like a couple colors we could pick from.
Hmm.
So I've been wanting somebody to do that forever. So I'm glad he's doing that. That's kind of cool. So, but for me, I like just some newels, or tough tails, whatever they call them, underneath, and then I put a rubber skirt, and yeah, you get like there's nothing there. It's like
What
just
about like?
skirt.
Do you feel that way for both lures and teasers, or?
No, I feel a little bit differently with the teasers,
Mm,
but I'm a little bit more new to like the bait and switch stuff. And so I may change my theories on this, but right now, like with my teasers, I'm doing double rubber skirts on them. And
interesting.
because I find that without the hook in there and everything, I need to add a little more stability to make the lures do what I want. Whereas that hook and that rudder and that stability, it now taking it out, it's now changed the dynamic of that lure. And at first I was like, what is going on? Why is this lure doing this? And I couldn't get him to run how I wanted. So I added a double skirts. I made them a little bit longer, I added a bit more stability, um, and was able to kind of get him more to do what I wanted. And then I also feel like, I don't know, maybe that rubber feel, um, that squishy kind of rubber feel doesn't turn the fish off. It could come back and whack it a bunch of times. But if I have a lure that runs good on vinyl, I'm going to keep it on vinyl. The teasers I'm pulling right now are like very aggressive and like all over. So if they don't run good on vinyl, like scoop lures, they don't run good on vinyl. They get too weird and they'll like disappear and they'll get lazy. They'll get all over like they just don't run good on vinyl for whatever
How
reason.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't like putting vinyl on them.
I think it's cool
Yeah.
that you brought up that also, additionally, if you have a lure that's not running the way you want it to, you might change out the length of the skirt,
Oh yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
material the skirt's made out of.
Yeah,
Now,
that makes a difference.
when we were bait and switching, we were primarily pulling vinyl skirted
Yeah.
lures, and it almost felt like I saw a handful of times when we had a rubber skirt out there that if a fish gets a mouthful of that, like if you don't get the teaser away in time, it's oftentimes it's going to get all up wrapped up in there. It almost felt like the vinyl wasn't quite as sticky with the
Uh-huh.
bill of the fish, and we had a couple marlin swim away with plastic skirts off their
On their
bill, but
face.
yeah. Just we're like,
Yeah,
oh man, when that
yeah,
happens. Oh,
yeah. And
but
like I said, I mean, I'm kind of newer to that bait and switch stuff, so maybe I will change my theories on it. But um, I've
well,
been
definitely
pulling
keep me
rubber
posted as you
skirts.
go because
Yeah,
I'm
I mean, I am.
curious.
I'm not. I'm not on all of them. I'm pulling double. I'm pulling like how I have this like one rubber skirt with the newels underneath. So, but yeah, I so far I haven't had too many problems, but we'll see.
That's cool. That's
Yeah,
cool. Um, we're running low on time, but I want to touch on a couple things. The first one
sure.
is with your bait and switch. Are you pitching 130s out there?
Well, right now we're pitching an 80 that I beefed up. I got the drag redone and beefed it up, put 130 on it with backing and all this. But I don't know, but we're gonna try that because what happened with us towards the end of last year was my biggest concern was it's you can't pitch a 130 really like you have
No.
to be so good and I just don't think it'd work and so we were doing like the tingum where you put a lure and so they were converting really good to the tingum but we weren't catching every fish and it wasn't like pitching a dead bait to them. It's just a different
No,
thing.
it's very
So we
different.
were, yeah, and we were trying it and I know a lot of guys in Madeira do it because sometimes they can't get bait or whatever and so they pull those tingums but they get a lot of shots there. Like our fish, everybody's going to say that you cannot bait and switch in Kona. That's just what people say. That's what they're telling me that I'm making a mistake doing it, blah, 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 blah. But they do bait and switch, but you're not going to get as many shots as like you would out of a fish. Like they're different everywhere, right? Like St. Thomas, they're going to pile on so many times, right? Like, and
They're
so they're a little
hungry.
bit different. Yeah. So they do feed a little differently. So, um, yeah, I think the dead bait thing is better than trying that tingum. I don't know. We missed some fish on that tingum, and I was like, what the
So what
hell?
is the tingum? It's like a lure that you pitch?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think the original one was like basically a mold craft with no skirt underneath it, with only a couple strands of skirt and just a
Mm,
hook. So
mm,
it's just a piece of rubber with a hook. And
yeah.
so any variation of that, I think you could be called a tingum. And basically, you put it in your spread as you're teasing the fish, and so you basically don't want to get it out there until that fish is gone. You basically want it going past so the fish doesn't see it as it's chasing that teaser, and then you want to get it in position because ideally you want the going away bite on the tingum. You don't want them chasing the teaser and then switching and eating a going like a behind bite. You want to aim for a going away bite, which so it's a
Interesting.
different than a bait and switch, right?
Yep.
Because I don't really want that going away when you're feeding one as much as you would with a tingum, because that going away bite with a hook lure is going to be way better than the behind because he's got that hook as he's eating it. He's got that hook coming right at his face. So if you get that going away, if you do like make it all work, right? It worked pretty good. Um, but and they're not all going to feed that way. A lot of times you just get that side rush, and then it's just like lure fishing, whatever. I mean, you might as well, whatever. So the only thing and then that changed my opinion on lures and like how I said earlier, once I started bait and switch fishing and all that kind of stuff there, I started thinking about the marlin fishing in Kona way different, because I saw that once you got them fired up on a very aggressive lure, didn't matter so much what was there. They're going to eat whatever was there next. So my thought was like, well, if our really aggressive, crazy lures that raise these fish are terrible at hooking them, then how often are they coming up and missing them or whatever, and then eating these other ones that are easier running lure, like a straight runner or something like that has a higher hookup rate. Then why are we, I don't want to put hooks in these big aggressive stuff anymore, or this, stuff moving all over the place. I just want them to convert to something that is going to hook them. And that changed my mind on what these animals are doing. I mean, I've had times where they come up and hit, you don't even see them, and they hit the teaser. And I have clips up in my
And
bridge
they're
just
big
holding the
fish.
teaser line. Yeah. And like I'm staring, I'm looking, and I never seen the fish. And it comes out of the clip. And if you didn't know better, you would have just thought, oh, maybe they hit a piece of grass, or like we don't have grass in Kona really, but
You
maybe
don't have
or like
rogue
maybe we
waves.
went, yeah, like we went downhill, like we went down sea or it caught a wave, and you look at the teaser and you pull it away and there's nothing there. The fish is, it was a ghost, and you're like, what happened? And then out of nowhere, there's like, there's, out of nowhere, the stinger comes down, and you got them on. And so
Faded.
I wonder how often that happens, where a fish will just come up on one of those, you don't see it, and then eat those easier lures in the back. So I've changed my spread to have a lot better hookup rate stuff in the back. So
That's cool.
um,
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you what like what's the benefit of teasing the fish? Like I when you're talking about the tingum and you're like I
yeah,
don't have a bait, but I have a lure with a J hook and I'm
yeah,
going to tease the fish up and then give them this lure with the J hook. Why even pull the teaser? Tell like
yeah,
how does the behavior of the fish change when it's when you properly
yeah.
tease one?
Yeah, and well, that was the thing too, was like, people will say that, like, well, if you're gonna just switch it to a lure, like if you're gonna just switch the fish over to a lure, then why pull, you know what I mean? Like why pull, why not just put a hook in your teaser, right? And the reasoning like the reason behind it is that you're trying to make that fish do a different bite. So you're wanting it, when they come up on the teaser or when they come up on a big aggressive lure up like that, you don't know how that thing's going to feed. It could do whatever. It could come up and explode on it. It could come up and whack it with its bill. So your chances of hooking that fish it's up in the air. But if you tease that fish all the way in, they're they're getting aggressive. They're pissed off. I
Mm,
mean, as long as you can tease it away. Like I found, like if I struggle and I can't get it away and he eats it too many times, then I'm
mm,
kind of screwed. And then you're
yeah.
kind of like, that's where, I mean that's why I like it so much, is because there's just so much skill in it, and there's so much involved
Yeah.
in it, and there's so much, like, it just adds a whole nother element. But yeah, if that thing gets you, like, yeah, you're screwed. But
No, yeah.
if you can get it away and get everything in position, that bite is going to be a proper bite usually. And like what we were saying with the lure was that we're hunting for that going away bite.
Yeah.
So you're not always going to get a going, you generally aren't going to get a going away bite when they come into the spread from behind or whatever. You're going to usually get like a inside out
Inside
bite, we
out.
call it,
Hmm.
which isn't a bad bite either.
No.
Or the worst, I think sometimes, is the ones from behind, or if they just come straight up at it and like a shark
Especially with
attack.
lures, especially with J hooks.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not the best. So,
Mm.
and that's probably where you were like talking a little bit about having the hook on its side. That might, and that's where people, then you can go down the double hook rig where you have one on its side and one down, and maybe that would help. But yeah, you're not going to get that going away bite what you want. But when they come off the teaser and then you have what you would call a tingum, if you can get that over the shoulder going away, when you see that back, and like if I'm sitting in the bridge and he eats it that way and I see his back and I see his dorsal, you're like, oh yeah, we got this guy,
That's so
pretty
cool.
much.
That's so interesting.
But it's not as good as a dead bait. I don't care what
No.
anyone says, like
And
it's
a circle
not.
hook.
Like we had, yes, and a circle, like we had him eat it perfectly, and I've just been like, oh yeah, no worries, like whatever, and then pull hook at some point. They're
Ah,
just,
that hurts.
yeah, so it's just not as good as a dead bait. But if you don't have it, it did work, and that's what we were doing with the 130, because you can do it with a 130. We were just having the drag light, and then my mate would hold it and get it
Mm.
over to where it needed to be, and when it ate, he would let go and run over, and then slowly push the drag up.
Right.
And that was kind of what we experimented with at first, because the consensus in Kona is everybody says the fish don't tease in Kona, and you cannot bait and switch in Kona. And I disagree with it, but that's just my opinion. But we wanted to just test it first and see. And from what we saw, I can't make a full, like, proper, this is going to work there until I give it a good, like, maybe a couple years, giving it hard,
Right.
But from what I've seen so far, I believe that the fish will tease here, and I believe you can do it. It's just takes work. It's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, it's totally different. It's a
Yeah.
different, I mean, say like me going in and trying to lure fish, I just like I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. It just you have to learn the game. You have to
Yeah.
relearn the game.
Hmm.
Um Question for you. You're working
Yeah.
now with GZ Lures. We're going to be doing some
Yes.
collaboration moving forward.
Oh yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about what you guys are launching over there?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing is GZ lures. A lot of people get confused with the name, and they think we make lures, and we do not make lures. We leave that to the artists, the professional lure makers. I mean, I wouldn't even attempt to make a resin lure. It's not. You have to. I have a lot of respect for these guys. That's what they do, and that's the lures we carry are the ones of the guys that have been doing it forever, not the person that just picked it up as a hobby. So we carry lures, and I think that is where the name, that's where it originally started. It was just a lure, a company that sold lures. So that's where it became GZ Lures. We're now kind of transitioning to that. We're going to also be using the name GZ Tackle Co. And so
Nice.
basically, yeah, so we're an online company, and our goal is to sell the best of what's out there. So, the stuff that professionals use. So like, for instance, working with you on that side of fishing, and, my specialty is what we just talked about. So I can all day long know what to pick. I can know what lures we want, what this, that, hook rigs, all that stuff. But then when we start to venture into different areas of fishing, we're using our pro staff, I mean our pro team, and we're doing a collaboration with you on a bunch of stuff, and like so that's ideally what we want to have. We don't want a customer to go on our website and have like 20 different hook brands and 20 different hooks and like 15 different lines and kayaks and all different fishing rods. That's not us. That's just not going to be what our model is. That's not what we're based off of. And maybe there's more money in that, but that's not what our plan is. Our plan is to provide like what the professionals are using, working with the professionals to provide what is the best stuff out there, and then putting
I
together
love that.
content on like how to use it, how to videos, like things like that, like just providing the elements. So, if you go on this site and you're like, okay, I want to buy this hook, I want to buy this, I want to do this. And then you can be like, well, why do we have it? And then you can read the different reasons and learn. And so, I don't know, we felt like there was a hole in the industry for that. And so when I got involved, and became a partner on the company, I just basically told Cole straight up, like, yeah, I want to do this, but we got to do it right. Like, I want to carry what's the best stuff out there. And I don't want to get persuaded to like carry this guy's lures because he's a friend of someone or what. Like, we want
Mm-hmm.
to carry what is the best stuff out there. So that's our mission, and it's been fun. I love it, actually. I really do. And it's growing, and then what we just did now was launching that subscription service, which is, it's got a lot of elements to it right now. Like, for instance, like you get a discount. There's like exclusive content on there. We have like discounted charters all over the world. We have like a social media type thing on there, so people can go and talk with each other, and just a bunch of like, that's just the start. But mainly, like, the thing is a platform, and we have a lot of ideas that we're going to start implementing into it, but it's a platform that can just be useful in so many ways. And we can do like live seminars on the thing, and we can do talking about doing like chaperone, like, not, I shouldn't say chaperone, that sounds funny, but like trips where like one of the professionals goes along on it. It's like a school. It's not like a
Chaperone.
chaperone. I mean, it'd be the exact opposite of a chaperone trip when you think about it. You know what I mean? It's like,
It's like high school band.
yeah, like, we gotta make sure you guys are okay. Bedtime is 10 o'clock, okay? We're fishing tomorrow. No, it's probably the exact opposite of that. But
Like
it would,
hosted trips. That's
yeah,
awesome.
hosted trips. That's the word we need to use. The chaperone thing needs to get thrown out. So hosted trips. And I mean, there's just all kinds of ideas we have that we're gonna, jump into it, and just kind of, just as more people get involved and like the budget increases and we can do things, the platform will continue to grow. It's not
Yeah.
it's not going to be one of these things where it's like, okay, this is what you get, and never changes for 5 years. Like,
No. It's a
it's a
living,
full-time
breathing
job.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was the main thing. Like, Cole and I had to be like, look, this is not going to be like a passive thing. Like, we do this, we're going to do it right. And it's got to continually evolve. So that's why it is a paid subscription, because it's like, the stuff we want to do, like, it can't just be done for free. Like, I love all you guys, but like, come on, like, how we do this without some sort of income? Like,
No, if it's going to be
it needs to
educational and
happen.
it's going to be
Yeah.
good, it's
So
going to be, yeah, the subscriber is going to grow from the experience with the GZ
yeah,
Lures membership.
and
So
that's the plan, and we call it GZ Elite, and
that's awesome.
yeah, that's where we're at with that. And
Well, you guys, if you're interested in that, I'm going to go ahead and tag that in the description below as well. So make sure you check it out. Chris, I can't thank you enough for your time. I have one last question for you.
yeah,
What
yeah.
is it that keeps you coming back to the ocean?
Oh, wow. Um, what is it? It keeps, well, I mean, it's like everything for me. I couldn't live without it. I mean, between the surfing and the fishing, I mean, it's everything. I mean, it's like my mistress, I guess you could say, because it's like it takes me away from everything, but at the same time, like when I'm there, I'm just so in love with the fact of being in it and being involved in everything that's going on out there. And yeah, it's everything, you know. It's being outdoors, it's the activities of it, it's enjoying the ocean. So I can't really say what one thing is, but I just know that I couldn't live without it. Even if it wasn't fishing, like there's always I have to be involved or on the ocean or near the ocean. Um, that's just how I am. Whatever reasoning that is, it's not changing. I don't see that happening. I'm definitely not going to be in a landlocked state at some point in my life. I sure hope not.
Heaven forbid.
So,
That was
yeah,
awful.
yeah,
No, that was a
yeah.
great answer. I love it. The way the ocean makes us feel, you just you can't compare it to anything
Oh
else. You
yeah,
can't.
yeah. You get home after a day on the ocean, fishing, surfing, whatever it is, whatever you're doing, just even going swimming, going to the beach and going swimming all day, like you just have that feeling about you that is, I have yet to see anything similar. So it's a healthy high.
Oh, it's a healthy high. I love
Yeah,
it. The
exactly.
salt.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool,
it
Chris.
is.
Well, I really
Thanks,
appreciate your time
Katie.
today.
Yeah,
Thanks for taking us to Lure 101 School, and we'll definitely
yeah,
have you back on this channel and talk a little bit more about what
sure.
it takes to fish around the world.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so much to the lure thing. I feel like I opened so many rabbit holes, and like, there's just you could go on for hours and hours. But I hope the little things I did say helped, and I'm sorry if I like left out some stuff or botched some stories here or there or whatever. But you get the idea, and I'm happy to talk lures with anyone whenever. I love this stuff. It keeps me excited. So yeah.
Y'all check Chris out on GZ Elite. Chris, will you also tell us where everyone can find you on social media?
Yeah, yeah. Grander Marlin. So pretty easy. Grander
Pretty
Marlin.
easy.
You
That's
can
pretty
find me on
rad.
there. Yep.
Thanks so much for joining us, Chris. And that's a wrap, you guys. You heard it here on the Katie C. Sawyer podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a review on your podcast listening platform if you would like to. And as always, don't stop chasing your wild. We'll see you guys out there.